And welcome to a brand new year, as well as brand new edition of Match Points here on tennismajors.com, where we get together to debate and discuss the biggest topics in tennis and be sleep deprived together, at least those of us here in North America, following last night's somewhat to majorly disappointing men's final here, there in Melbourne. Let's say hello once again to our panel. As some of them are obviously better rested than others. You can guess who's whom. Let's begin first and foremost with the very well rested and lovely 2013 Wimbledon champion, tennis, of course, great broadcaster, our friend Marion Bartoli. First of all, congratulations on behalf of all of us, new addition to the family.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm not well rested, but I'm really happy to see you guys once again.
Great to have you with us once again. Tennis writer from the New York Times and elsewhere, host of the No Challenges Remaining podcast. If he looks tired and sleep deprived, we're in the same boat. He's been up all night. He is Ben Rothenberg. Sir, a pleasure. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year. Glad to be here. Glad to be awake. I can't promise I'll stay awake for the whole show, but hopefully people keep it interesting with their spicy opinions here to keep me from yawning. Let's put it that way.
Don't worry. Most viewers feel the same way about hoping to stay awake during the episode. And also, finally, joining us once again, president of the International Tennis Writers Association, contributor to ESPN, The Guardian, and now right here to tennismajors.com, Simon Cambers. Happy New Year to you, sir, as well. You're a little better rested than Ben and I are, correct?
Yeah, I'm not up in the middle of the night, so it's not so bad. But it's been a lot of early starts. So, it's pretty tough doing a Grand Slam from 10, 12,000 miles away and trying to balance family life at the same time.
Let's go to our second set now. Let's move over onto the tournament and primarily the men's side. Injuries became such a major part of the storyline. In fact, it looked as though the champion, Novak Djokovic, was going to be eliminated by Taylor Fritz in a fifth set because of injury. And then we had, retirements and such, and there was talk about. My question to you is, how much of injury information should be made public in advance? Other sports leagues demand it, require it. The NFL, there's a weekly report on Thursdays for American football. How much injury information should be made public in advance? Marion Bartoli, you go first.
Absolutely zero. Because any report anyway, as a player, you don't want to give away anything to your opponents, obviously. So whatever is going to be reported is not the truth. So why not just being honest and by just not saying anything? And, you see if the player, the way they behave on the court, they sort of guess what is happening. But I don't understand why we need to sort of say, I have this injury and this is this bad and it's that bad and whatever. And it's going to tear or it's not a tear. Or it's just wrong. So let's just keep it secret and that's it.
All right, well, I can tell you why it's important because, the tournaments and the networks partner with gambling and with the DraftKings, et cetera, and not having that information, particularly, 2 sets need to be completed when you wager on a tennis match for the wager to count. But that's why, in my opinion, obviously that information is made. The NFL reports injuries for gambling purposes only, even when it was completely illegal. Ben, you don't agree with Marion completely, do you?
Well, I was going to say something a little bit. I wasn't going to say exactly the same way you were, but there is an integrity issue about injury disclosure and, inside information about someone being hurt or not hurt, really. And that's a big factor in a lot of tennis, dubious betting things. You don't want that to become an even bigger market for black market information about what someone's injury may or may not be, and reports coming from the training room of who's got tape where, who's feeling what. That would really intensify if there was more of an official blackout on health information. And I do think also that there is just something, and Mary, you can feel free to disagree with this, but there's something about being a pro athlete and having your physicality put on display for thousands of people and millions on TV and earning you money, that you sort of do sacrifice some degree of privacy about your physical state. If you were playing with a sprained ankle or a torn abdominal muscle or something, it's sort of relevant to the story of the match and the way people watch the match and the way people decide whether or not they want to buy tickets to this match. If you're playing and they know that you can barely walk. I think that athletes don't have the same sort of. It depends on what it is. If if a player, I don't know, gets an STD or something, they don't need to disclose that to the audience. But if it's something that's going to affect their performance, I think it's probably right. It's something that the sort of viewing public is used to getting in sports, and I don't see a big reason to eliminate that.
Marion, you want to challenge? Continue. Before I get into the STD issue with Ben, go ahead.
I do want to challenge it because obviously I've been on the court myself, sometimes injured, and going to the training room and the trainer is asking, so what do you want us to say to the media or whatever? And obviously you don't want to say anything just because simply you don't want to show your opponent how sometimes badly you're injured. But you just want to, if you feel you can still go out there and compete, you want to use your mental strength to cope with the pain and just keep on plugging on every game and try to win the match. And I think it's sort of part of the play that someone just come on the court and play tennis, whether they have an injury or not, it's their own problem. And I really strongly don't think that anyone should be aware of it. If obviously can pick up on the image that you see someone wearing a tape, then it's part of us as a media to say, well, look, they're wearing a tape, maybe there is an issue there. And then as a commentator, you're able to see also there is a restriction in movement, restriction in play, etc., etc. But I strongly believe that it's not the part of the player to release that.
Well,
Simon,
I would just say if a player wants to decline questions or specifics, like Djokovic was kind of doing at parts of this tournament when he wasn't getting into specifics of how bad his tear or his abdominal issue, whatever it was, that's his right. But I think it's more situations, I think, what Azarenka was getting upset about when it sort of started this whole conversation, saying that, like, I think what you're saying, Marion, if like you retire from a match, that you have to give a reason for why you're retiring or withdrawing from a match in the parentheses on the draw sheet. And I think that's good for transparency. I think that does help people know that things are on the up and up. And players certainly lie about that reason all the time too. They don't have to be honest. If they want to say I hurt my ankle when actually it's because their girlfriend dumped them or something, sure. These things happen.
All right, Simon, the good news is we have a disagreement here, so you get to tell someone they're right, and more importantly, you get to tell one of these two they're wrong. Who's right, who's wrong, Ben or Marion?
Well, I don't think there's any need for a player to talk about an injury before a match. I don't think there's that necessity. I think in the first place, a lot of players are carrying niggles anyway, all the way through the year. At various times, they've got some sort of thing that's not perfect. So you're never going to talk about all that while you come into it. You don't want to give away anything to your opponent. Absolutely agree with Marion on that. I think that the problem, or partly why we're talking about this, not just what Azarenka said, which I thought was ridiculous, but I think what Djokovic did by saying it's definitely a muscle tear in the heat of the moment, of course, on court. It just led to a difficult situation where he's obviously going to get asked loads of questions. He decided then to be evasive. It looked bad. He gets criticised. It's a vicious circle. It's just not wise. Fine, he doesn't have to talk about it, but don't make a big deal out of it on the court then. Just say, when you come to the press conference, just say, no, I'm going to be okay. I thought it was bad at the time. I think I'll be all right. Wasn't it Venus Williams who says, if I'm here on court, I'm ready to play. Let's go.
Mm-hmm. All right, so should players then report their sexually transmitted diseases even during the off season? Ben had an idea on that. I'm kidding, of course. Ben, the STD example, maybe not your strongest moment on this show.
I'm saying there are limits. I'm saying, and this goes into like therapeutic use exemptions and stuff, like in the sport.
We get it.
But maybe that could just be internal amongst the other players. That'd be fine.
We get it.
Depends
but it would be fun though.
How internal it would be. Yeah.
No, it would be fun though in the off season.
Worldwide emergency if something happened.
Yeah, like in the off season, if players or retired players just reported, for no reason, their sexually transmitted diseases. Novak Djokovic says, quote, "With all respect I have, this generation is far from us." Speaking about himself and, of course, the other two of the big three. The question, my friends, is has the gap between Rafa and Djokovic for now and the so-called next generation stars, and we'll call them, say, Medvedev and Tsitsipas, has that gap closed at all? And if so, how much has it actually closed by as of now? Simon, you go first.
I think it's on two levels. It's in a general way, it has closed a little bit because Tsitsipas is getting to semis, Medvedev's making finals, Zverev made a final, Team won one last year. They're getting there, but they're still not taking over the game, are they? I mean, it's still Djokovic, Nadal winning the slams, and if even more and more these days, the game is measured by who's winning the Grand Slams. I think I'm right in saying it's 15 out of 16, because Wimbledon didn't happen, that Federer, Nadal or Djokovic, in the other order really, have won a slam. And that's just unbelievable. It might even be Nadal and Djokovic alone. And, they're still dominating. And we're talking about someone who's 35 this year, Rafa, 34 this year, Djokovic, and Federer, who's 39. It's amazing. They're getting a bit closer. They're able to compete on a game-to-game, match-to-match basis. But in terms of winning Grand Slams, I don't really feel like they're any closer. Nadal or Djokovic is going to win the French. Wimbledon is probably going to be Novak. You're still looking, or Federer if he's fully functioning. Who knows? They're still a long way away.
Quick body language note, quick teaching moment. When you mentioned 15 to 16, Ben, you'll notice, was looking up, and that's universal for thinking, like the emoji. That's a real thing.
I was thinking, yeah.
That's a recall gesture. That's a tell that you're trying to recall as opposed to lie. Ben, so has the gap closed, and if so, by how much?
Should I be trying to lie about this answer? I'm just going to keep you on your toes.
I'm just about to look up.
Yeah, I was doing the math in my head. Yeah, I think 15 and 16 is right. I think my answer would have been different for this, depending on what happened 8 hours ago or so, whenever this men's final was of the Australian Open. Had that not been so lopsided, I mean, even if Medvedev loses a close one, I could say, yeah, it's getting closer. But Djokovic was today very much announcing you're not close, Daniil, in every way in this match. And Dominic Thiem only won that Grand Slam because Novak hit a ball at some lady's throat. So,
not at her throat. I mean, it hit her in the throat.
Toward her throat. Is that better? In the direction of her throat.
Actually, no, it was at her throat.
Throatwardly.
Because, it was at her throat.
Yeah, at her throat. Yeah. Not like aimed it at her throat, but he hit. Yes. We all know what happened. All of these things, I mean, and then we just got message after message that they're not all that close. And it's surprising because there's all this data. I mean, what Medvedev had done before the Australian Open final, winning 20 straight matches, including beating Djokovic and 11 other top 10 wins, and beating everyone who's in the top 10 who was on tour except for Federer, who's been off tour, was as comprehensive as you can be in terms of setting up a resume that you are ready to win, a Grand Slam. And then he comes up and plays that bad in the final. It takes a lot of air out of it. And so we'll see. Yeah, the next Grand Slam is, and I do agree with Simon, it's almost all about Grand Slams now in terms of measuring this. Yep. Maybe if someone else gets to number 1 or even number 2 in the rankings, that could shake things up. I think Medvedev could get to number 2 pretty soon with some good results. But yeah, it's going to take someone. What there has not been in men's tennis, which is kind of shocking, since I guess if you want to say Wawrinka, but he wasn't young when he won his slam, is a match like we've had so many of on the women's side, but Serena especially, like a Serena Osaka, Serena Andreescu, whatever it is, where it's like a big torch pass moment, someone young coming up and winning a final against a big established player. We have not had that in men's tennis.
We thought this morning, last night might be that moment.
Yeah, it could have been, and he wasn't even close. So we're just really missing a transition in men's tennis. Until we get that, it's business as usual. Yeah,
here's how you know last night or this morning was supposed to be that moment. Novak Djokovic was about a minus 115 favorite. That's coin flip. That means he's not an odds maker favorite. It's literally either of you have an equal chance to win. And we've not seen that before. Marion Bartoli, has the gap closed? And if so, by how much?
Just a tiny bit, just based on the fact that, yes, Daniil has been able to beat Novak in 2 sets in last year's London Championship in the Masters. But I just believe that those guys just cared about the Grand Slams. For Novak, Rafa, and Roger, when they will return, it's just about how many Grand Slams they can get in order to pass 20 for Novak, and then who is going to end up on top, really, between those 3. That's all they care about. And as Novak said, they're not ready to leave their place just because they want to stand first on the record book. And based on that, I think for the young guns, it's going to be so hard to just win one because they will have to beat either Novak and Rafa, or maybe Novak and Roger, or Rafa, Roger, or whatever. And out of 5 sets, I just don't see that happening. And, Rafa is going to be the overwhelmed favorite once again in Roland Garros. I think grass is going to be for Novak, maybe Roger if he can come back fit, but I just don't see any one of those young generation coming on regular basis to beat those guys in a Grand Slam. Just the 5 setters, the physical part, the mental part, I think they're not quite there yet. And it's just, for me, just about who is going to take over when those 3 will be gone. And I think Daniil Medvedev is probably the one which is the best armed with Tsitsipas.
All right, Ben, quick challenge. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to say, I actually thought there was a moment in this Australian Open when Tsitsipas beat Nadal in the quarterfinals, where it was the first time that I really felt like Nadal was losing a match because he wasn't as physically fit as somebody else. I think that as that match went longer and longer, Tsitsipas looked physically stronger. And that felt like a big moment at that moment. And then Tsitsipas turns around for the next match against Medvedev and is dead and can't do anything. And so that makes that deflate quickly. But in that moment, it did make me think, wow, this is actually finally, it looks like time is showing up in a match with a younger guy against one of the big three. And yeah, but it didn't mean Tsitsipas won the tournament, but it was a real moment, I thought, in that quarterfinal.
Marion, we're operating on Hawkeye only, but you want to challenge the challenge. Go right ahead.
No, I just want to say that in order to win a Grand Slam, and this is a problem for the young generation, they will have to put 2 or 3 very difficult matches in a row. And this is what they're lacking now. They can do it on once, they can do it one time, but 2 or 3 become too difficult for them, especially physically.
All right, I just want a name. That's it, you guys. I just want a name. Not a why, not a how, not a when. A name. So, of this next generation, on the men's side, Tsitsipas, Medvedev, Zverev, you mentioned team. Who will be the first to break through and win that major? Who of this next generation will be the first to get this next generation major? Simon, I see you thinking, not recalling because it hasn't happened yet. It's a different body language tell. Go ahead, Simon. You go first. Give me a name.
I really want to say Shapovalov because he's my favorite.
Really?
He's my favorite player these days. I think he's got everything to be number one if he puts it all together, but he's a way off it yet.
Okay.
I'll say Medvedev, US Open.
Okay. All right. Marion, who will be the next gen to be the first to break through?
Gosh, that's a tough one. I think Medvedev on fast surface, and I think Thiem on clay.
All right. Ben.
Sinner.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry?
Ooh.
Yannick Sinner.
Oh,
Yeah.
Sinner. Yes.
Yeah, French
under
Open.
the
He'll just win them all from here. I think he's wonderful, and he played Shapovalov in the first round of the Australian Open, which was 5-setter.
Look,
Yeah,
Ben, talk
I mean,
about...
I just think also this generation, I mean, might not be, if they're not good enough, it might be because they're not good enough. And maybe the next generation will come by and pass them by. Never know.
And Ben brought up earlier the idea of passing the torch. If none of these young guys win any of these while the big three are still playing, that's not passing a torch.
That's picking up a torch that's fallen on the ground. Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's what we couldn't do it while they were there, and then the debate is moot. Gang, thanks so much. Great job. Marion Bartoli, Ben Rothenberg, Simon Cambers. Folks, thank you, as always, for watching. Remember to follow on all social media and share this episode as well. And we will see you next time for more match points right here on tennismajors.com. So long, everybody.